News Talk 1400 KFRU is proud to present the KFRU Heritage Series. Listen each Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. It's a 1-hour perspective on the events and the people whose lives have contributed to the heritage of Boone County. The KFRU Heritage Series from News Talk 1400 KFRU.
We are going to talk about something that I've heard about since I was a kid, it seems like, and maybe I'll get the details right as we talk with Mike Weir, whose father started Red Weir. I don't even know the official title of the store, but it's a pleasure to have Mike Weir as our guest on our Heritage Show. Nice to meet you. How are you?
I'm doing very well today, David.
If you were going to put on a legal, what is the official name of the store?
Red Weir Athletic Supplies, Inc.
Inc. All right, and we can talk about what other things you do, but I mean, I grew up 60 miles from here, and it just seems like for me, Red Weir was synonymous. I mean, it was like a place that you came if you needed sporting goods. How long has that store or the company been in business?
My father started it in August of 1961 is when we actually had a storefront down on Broadway, 1019 East Broadway, next door to Book Raiders. And prior to that, we lived on Proctor Drive, and for about 6 months, he worked out of his house.
Really? So what was going on in his life that he said, I'll start an athletic supply store?
Well, he graduated from Central Methodist over there, and he went to work as a coach. He coached at that time. Schools got out at 3:30, and all sports activities, practice-wise, was out 3:30. Everybody had to ride the bus, and so he coached basketball, football, track. That's all the sports they had basically at that time, a little cross country.
And where was this?
He started out at Stockton, Missouri, down there by the lake, and he coached there for 5 years, and he was fortunate enough Stockton started playing football, and he started that football program down there. And then after 5 years, he moved over to Eldon High School and coached basketball and track and started their football program. And what made him, he was there for 5 years, and he took Eldon to, at that time, it was SM&L, the state basketball championships. And in 1955, that's when I was born, and he was playing in St. Louis at, I believe it's the old Kiel Auditorium down there, is where they hosted that. And he had Eldon High School in the state playoffs, and ended up, I believe it was second place. He got beat by one of the bigger teams from St. Louis.
Yeah, when you talk about just three classifications,
right,
small, medium, and large,
right,
you're going to run into some pretty good-sized differences
right
within each classification.
And then during the course of the next year, he had a little problem with the superintendent, which some school teachers and administrators do, and it was all about, it was funny, it was, the post office was directly across the street from Eldon High School, and at that time most people had post office boxes, and so he would go over there during his free period to pick up his mail. The superintendent didn't like that, and they had several conversations about that, and you know, when you'd been in the war and some of those things, you operated a little different. You had a little different opinion, and he told the superintendent, if you come down here one more time and tell me this, you can have the keys and you can coach all three sports and all that. And so the superintendent did, and my father handed him the keys, and he went home, and my mother said, what are we going to do? We've got a small child here. We don't have a job. Well, you know, growing up in Macon, everybody quail hunted or whatever, and so it happened to be in November, and so that's what my dad did. He was friends with the dentist and one of the doctors and a couple guys on the school board, and they just quail hunted every day. And so I don't remember this because I was probably eating baby food, but we had a lot of quail.
Yeah.
And so then one of his friends in Jeff City worked at a sporting goods store, and he said, Red, you ought to think about doing this. You know all the coaches. You can call on schools and sell them equipment and things. And so my dad worked for him for about 6 months, and then he decided, I can do this. I'm going to move to Columbia and start my own business, and that's what he did.
Wow. So 1961, you said, was when the storefront
Yeah.
And that was on Broadway.
Right.
Is that next to where you said next to where Book Raiders is now?
Yes.
Do you remember that store?
Oh yeah. I spent lots of time down there.
So as a kid, is
As a
that
kid?
just like your play area?
Yeah, that was my play area, and we had lots of shelving. And one of my favorite things to do, according to my mother, was we had all kinds of sweatsuits that came in and crawl up there in the top on the third shelf and take a nap.
How about that?
Yeah.
Now, do you have other relatives, brothers? Or?
I have one brother, Rusty, who's my partner.
Yeah.
Or we're partners.
So how long was it on the Broadway location?
Oh, that's let's see, about 25 years.
Wow. So that would have taken you up into the mid-'80s at least.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember it being there because that's did he advertise much? How did he get the word out that Red Weir was open for business for athletic supplies?
Well, I think that his biggest thing is because he was on the road every day, and he, in your case from Macon, he called on Coach Hugh Dunn.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I mean, I knew, and Coach Dunn, I think, and those became some of the best salesmen for the store.
All right. That's right. And he knew all the coaches, and he called on them religiously, and it's a service game is what it is. It's not like it is now, but it still boils down to service. The coach calls and he needs a can of Tough Skin. He doesn't need it in a week. He needs it tonight or tomorrow night or whatever.
They still sell Tough Skin?
Oh, yeah, they still do.
Do they still sell Kramer Jezik or
oh,
whatever
yeah.
that stuff?
Yeah, you're familiar with that. You're a track guy.
Just don't get it in the wrong spot.
That's right.
It's really painful.
That is right.
So, I mean, it seems to me like that was like a supply. I mean, did you? I'm curious as to now. I would think that like if I had a football program now at a school, I might go direct to Nike or Adidas or something like that. Or do they still go through a supplier like Red Weir?
Most all of those companies still go through a dealer network. There's companies out there that go to direct, but.
So a school, I mean, would come to you for an order, perhaps for they say, well, I'm going to change my uniform, or I'm going to do this or that, and so you're still doing that. Is that what you do through the warehouse?
Actually, yes, we do that through the warehouse, but we have 3 salesmen, and they call on schools every day, and I call on schools myself. My brother only has one account. He calls on the University of Missouri almost 2 or 3 times a week. It just takes that much time to deal with those.
So how far away are some of the schools that you would know have done business with a Red Weir?
Basically, you could put a circle in Columbia and draw a 65, 75-mile circle around there.
Yeah. When you first memories of the athletic supply business, and you talk about crawling up and laying on some sweatpants or whatever sweats, that would have been the nice, good, plush cotton kind that
right.
we remember so well, and
That's
a lot
right.
of times they'd be gray, and that would have been soft. Now, sweatpants aren't quite like they used to be, but
No.
I mean, the memory of what the supply, what you basically carried at that point in time, things. You know, you walk into a place now, and there's so many choices to make of all kinds of things. But what were the staple products that you can remember back then?
My dad always focused on hard goods, what we call in the industry hard goods, which are bats and balls and helmets and shoulder pads and things that you wouldn't buy at one of our competitors now that have 50 styles of running shorts and shoes and things like that. And, you know, at that time, Chuck Taylors, the Converse that everybody wore, I can remember when we used to sell those for $3.95. I had to buy a pair for my daughter here a couple of years ago, and they were like $49 or $59.95, and it was the same thing.
And really, we go through the Chuck Taylors pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing about it is, and I bet Macon probably bought this, you would have to get them in the color of whatever the color was for the schools.
You know, when it first started out, it was just white. That's all there was, and then they added black, and then they added high tops, and so I can remember that was one of my jobs of riding with my dad. We'd go to the school to sell Macon basketball team, and all the kids would be there, and we'd have the shoes. You'd try them on, and then write their names down and the size, and then collect the money, and the kids would have their shoes, and we'd do that 2 or 3 times every day prior to basketball season.
And we had some beautiful orange shoes.
Oh,
up there.
you did? I can remember those.
And I can remember I was hard on shoes. I stopped and started a lot, and so I can remember the soles kind of getting worn out. It wasn't their bad shoes. It's just that the shoes at that point in time would wear out. I imagine they do the same thing now. Mike Weir is our guest. We're talking about Red Weir Athletic Supply. I can also remember, and since you brought up Coach Dunn was such a terrific guy. I mean, it still is, but I would remember sometimes at track practice, he would come in with a new pair of Adidas or something like that. Were you all going around saying, "Here are the new things"?
Yes, that's part of sales.
I knew they had to come from someplace like that. So, do you remember like when waffle trainers were first introduced from Nike? What was that like?
Nike struggled for years and years, and then they hit with the Oceana, which was one of the first track flats, little nylon shoe and a little waffle type bottom, and then they came out with they've advanced from there. Yeah,
but that was
it's
a big
amazing
deal.
because we still have some old pairs of. We still have some leather football helmets that we've saved over the course of the year, and compare the new football shoes to what they weigh now, and the cleat formations on the bottom, and the basketball shoes. It's incredible, the technology. And
what else is even the cloth that you see in the material that it's made?
Yeah, it's gone from cotton, and the old baseball pants were called cricket cloth, which had a lot of wool, and they used to be yellow, and then you would wash them, and then they would turn white. Well, you give that to a kid nowadays.
Yeah.
They go, what is this?
Yeah.
But we've saved some of those just for relics.
You could have a museum.
Oh, we could.
I'm so glad that you've saved some of those. But because things, it seems, and I'm the same age as you are it seems what drastic changes there are, but kids in a relatively short amount of time, to me, it doesn't seem like it's been that long since things have really evolved into generation after generation of new. It's just like at the radio station or other places, things change quickly when you're in the business, it seems like.
Oh, yeah. Just you mentioned your daughter in softball. You just think about baseball bats. When we grew up, everything was a baseball, wood. And they came in 32s, 33s like that. There weren't a bunch of sizes. There was no drop on the ounces and whatever. And you took your glove and your bat and you went to the ballpark and played all day. Now you've got to have a certain type of glove, a certain type of ball.
And the
bats. Oh, yeah, the bats are just incredible.
If they cracked, if they weren't cracked very badly, you put a little nail in there and you put electrical tape around it and you go out and bat again.
Yeah.
It might sting your hands a few times when you hit it.
And nobody thought the difference. That was just the way it is. But now, at that time, I think wooden bats were in the vicinity of $7.95. I can remember, it was nothing for us to have 500-600 dozen bats come in, 12 in a box. They were wooden and they broke during the course of the year.
Wow, that's a lot.
Now you're talking about some of these high-dollar softball bats, and they're $395.
When did you feel you talk about hanging out down there as your dad ran the store on Broadway, but when did you start to become more involved in it and start to work there so that you were paying more attention to what was going on from the business side?
After we moved over on Manor Drive out there by the Broadway Shopping Center, and so I went to West Junior, and so we walked to school. Then after school, we walked down to the Broadway Shopping Center. There was Crown Drug Store in there on the corner where the golf store is.
Sure.
And so you could have a cherry Coke, and then the city bus came right over there, and it was $0.25. And so every day before we went to school, my dad would give us $0.25 to get on the bus. It went downtown. We got off at, we were on 10th. It was on 8th Street down there where Landmark Bank is, and then we'd walk up to the store. There weren't babysitters or anything. You had to take care of your own kids, and so that was our job, is to come down there. So we swept the floors, emptied the trash, and here's another unique thing that I was thinking about this morning is every day at a certain point of time, we would have to go to the post office to ship packages. There was no FedEx that came. There was no UPS. You went to the post office, or if you had a shipment going to a school, you'd have to call the truck line, and you'd have to have all the labels on all that, and that's the way it was.
Truck line might be like Churchill or something like that, a shipping
ABF
truck line.
Freight.
It would be a freight line, and you would be shipping out a ton of stuff.
Right.
Literally a ton of stuff, and a lot of shipments like that.
Right.
What's the biggest? Is it football equipment? Is that what you remember as being the biggest stuff? The most
football.
stuff you would send out, obviously? And
football, because at that time, a few schools had wrestling and all the other things they've added. And you have to remember in 1960, it was men only.
Oh, that's true, too. Yeah, it wouldn't have changed until the early 70s.
Right. About
How did that change?
Well, all of a sudden what it did is, the football or the school athletic budget had X, and now X was spent on 3 sports, 4 sports, and now X was spent on 6 sports. So it took them a while to get more money for the girls, and Title IX, when that all came in, and it just increased the volume of everything. It didn't increase the dollars so much right away, but down the road it did.
Because the budgets were limited, and you just were slicing the pie in many more pieces.
That's right. And then when the budgets for like school districts, athletics, schools were the focus of every small town, that was what was going on at the school. Now, Columbia used to be that a little bit, but now you have the University of Missouri and all their activities from A to Z going on over there. You have activities at Columbia College and things like that. And so booster clubs were formed in small schools, and it was a booster club for the whole athletic department. Nowadays, it's booster club for the football team, booster club for the girls basketball team, girls track.
One of the other things is that with social media and with television and the sports programs that are on TV, people get an idea of what's out there as far as the product is concerned. But I got to tell you, we didn't know what was coming oftentimes until the coach opened up the cardboard box that had the new shipment in that, or you came down to the store and it was you had to go to the store to browse to find out what was new.
Right. In the beginning, there was only like 5 or 6 major manufacturers. There was Rawlings, Wilson, McGregor, Spalding, like that. Now you just take those, and I can name you 25 companies that all sell the same thing. And the social media, like you're talking about, is the consumer is, in a lot of ways, more intelligent consumer. I would guess the internet provides opportunities to read and study about this bat does this glove does that, and things like that. So it's you have to stay up with what's going on in the world.
Yeah. We'll take a break here, and we'll come back. We're going to talk more with Mike Weir. We're talking about Red Weir and the athletic supply company that has been a part of Columbia. Gosh, that would put it over 50 years. You're starting into your second half century.
We're going to start 53 here in August.
How about that? We'll continue our conversation. We appreciate our listeners with us this morning on the Heritage Program. This is News Talk 1400 KFRU.
More coming up on News Talk 1400 KFRU. This is the KFRU Heritage Series.
Our Heritage Show guest this week is Mike Weir. You'll know Red Weir Athletic Supply Company. As we've heard just a while ago, he was talking about how his father started that. You said started it in his house, moved to Broadway. Then from there, did it move out to its current location out Crossroads?
Yeah. What happened is there was a store out there called Achilles Heel, which specialized in Adidas shoes. And they had a little financial trouble, and so the bank called up my father and wanted to know if we'd be interested in moving out there. And Raul Walters owns the shopping center at that time, and so my dad went out there and made a deal with him. And so then we had 2 locations, and then shortly after that, one of the fellows that worked for my dad for a long time decided that he wanted to move to Jeff City because that's where his wife was, and so my dad helped him open up a sporting goods down there on a 50-50 basis, and that was called Capital Sporting Goods. And then another individual that was working for my father was from Kansas City in Raytown, and he decided that since the other fella in Jeff City was doing pretty well, he'd move to Kansas City. So we opened up Raytown Sporting Goods, and we started with that. And then one of my father's good friends from Versailles, Missouri, named Larry Pummel, he was coaching at that time and decided he didn't want to do that anymore. And so my father helped him open up Pummel Sporting Goods in Sedalia. And then about that time is when I finished with school over at Missouri, and over there where the shack was, there was a little sporting goods store over there, and for the life of me, I can't remember. I've been trying to think what. So we opened up a little store over there for campus sports, and so we had a store. We had actually 7 at a while, and then just one day my dad decided that enough's enough. Joe Frankie, who owned the property over there across from Jesse Hall, was selling it to the university. He goes, this is a good time just to go to one store. And so he eventually sold all the others to the guys, and we closed the campus store after about 10 years. We closed Broadway. That was kind of the same time my dad was on the special business district board when they started the Loop.
Yes.
And I don't think we've ever recovered from the Loop downtown.
Wow.
And so we moved out to Crossroads.
What, the Loop, and then I'd have to ask, was he still doing that when the awnings came on?
Oh yeah.
So he had all kinds of fun things with that down there. Does he ever talk much, and did he talk much about that experience?
Well, the interesting thing, I was talking to Gary Kespool, I don't know, a month ago, is I was teasing him a little bit about the council meetings and things like that, and I go, hell, in the old days, the city council meetings used to be held at Ernie's Steakhouse between 6 and 9 o'clock in the morning. That's where everybody that had a business or a lawyer or CPA or any... And the city folks, the guys working for the city and the county, everybody came up and had coffee or breakfast or whatever, and lots of things were decided right there.
Oh, that's great. Of course, now there would be problems about the sunshine law, about meeting without having proper advertisement about the fact that they were going to meet.
And I was laughing the other day, too, that we filled out the deal for the city business license. And in the old days, Chubb Phillips was the business license manager. He'd start up one side of Broadway and go, hey, Red, you need to write a check for whatever it was at that time, your business license. So he'd correct it, collect all the money up that side, and work the other side. And a week later, he'd come back, and everybody'd have their business license.
How about that?
Yeah.
Did he say what he thought about the Loop, or what he thought about any of those other changes that were meant to make downtown, I guess, more convenient and friendly for people?
He thought it would kill downtown.
Yeah.
And
the Loop, for those people who don't know, you might describe what the Loop is. I can't remember for sure when that was, but I do remember the Loop being here. I guess I must have been in school here when that was happening.
Well, if you're coming from the east, from Stevens College, you made a right-hand turn there where the new hotel and the parking garage is. And so then you went down Walnut right there. Maybe it was 10th Street. You made a right-hand turn. You went down 2 blocks, and it ended up down there by the post office, and it was one way.
One way.
And started the other way down there by Ron's Country Boy, which is what, Lucy's now.
Yeah, Lucy's.
And it came back up on, what is that, Cherry Street, something like that. And so it looped around, and that was supposed to make it so you could go east and west faster through downtown Columbia, but it didn't work, and people got confused. And then 10th Street was one way and 9th was the opposite, and it was not a good deal. And,
it's nice that it's not that way anymore, but you go to some communities now and you get into those one-way streets all the time, and it's like, what are they thinking here, and how complicated is this? You have to get used to it. Mike Weir is our guest. We're talking about Red Weir Athletic Supply. Did you ever, have you ever spent time, you mentioned the baseball bats, and I can remember shopping for baseball bats as a kid. You just had to you knew that feel. You hoped to find that right feel that would lead to hit after hit and long life of a wooden bat. Have you ever stood and watched, maybe secretively, little boys and now girls come in and shop for athletic supplies?
Oh yeah. And I tell you what attracts them now is color. That's why on the aluminum bats the bat's basically the same. You can only do so much to an aluminum and the alloy and things like that, and you can only take so much weight off of them. But it's the color. It's the color that drives the bat sales a little bit.
Is it like how it used to be, though? I mean, this is a treasure. I mean, going into these kinds of stores are a treasure. You just know that what you're getting is something that is a tool for something that means so much to you and you have so many dreams and hopes for.
Oh, yeah, like wooden bats. 15/16 was the thin-barreled Roger Maris, and it had a barrel, and so you looked at the grain. The Nellie Fox was the thick-handled 1 1/8 handle, and the big barrel and all that, and you'd look at the grain, and people would feel it. Now it's all about the grip and whether it's in-loaded or balanced bat on the aluminum side and what color it is.
Do you sell many wood bats, though?
The funny thing is we started putting some wood bats in because the high schools are having wood bat tournaments. Some of the summer leagues are, too, and it's a brand new thing. They have no idea, and a lot of their dads grew up during the metal bat era,
Sure.
and they have no clue about that.
Oh,
And,
man, that's giving us an idea of how old we
yeah,
are.
too
You know,
old.
The dads growing up during that. I guess you have to go to the grandparents now to be able to figure out then the smell of the gloves. I mean, I don't know. It has to be great to just have that smell, and I don't know if it's still quite like it used to be.
The high-dollar gloves are still the ones that are made in the United States. Have that smell, but the rest of the lower-end gloves are all made overseas, and in order to ship a leather product back, they have to spray it with some kind of, I don't know.
Do you sell much of glove oil anymore?
Oh, yeah,
we
you
used to-
still
I mean,
sell
you used to
glove
make-
oil, yeah.
Put that on there all
Yeah.
the time. I didn't know if kids still did that or not.
Yeah, and my brother, I don't know how long ago, 20, 25 years ago, he went to Rawlings one day and went to school down there on how to relace ball gloves, and so he's really good at that. If he
Really, I'll have to
Yeah.
remember that because my old gloves kind of
Yeah.
got a lace that broke, and we kind of jerry-rigged something that works
Sure.
right now. It's not like I'm going out and playing ball very often. It's good enough to work with a little
The
girl.
first thing is you have to have the right tools. If you have the right
Yeah.
awls, it makes it a lot easier and follow the pattern.
You mentioned the price of a pair of Chuck Taylor Converse All-Stars and what it used to cost and what they cost now. Is there anything else that you just say, I can't believe the cost of this now? You mentioned bats also and the aluminum bats, and you didn't really get into the price of that. But would a ball glove, would the equipment like a football helmet, or what's
A football helmet is the cost of that. When I first started working for my dad, we sold a varsity-type football helmet for $49.95. And now they're $299.
Wow.
And the manufacturers say most of that, the helmet actually costs less to manufacture now with the improvements. It's the liability insurance. And most of those, there's 2 or 3 helmet companies now, and they stack their insurance and end up with Lords of London or one of the big underwriters.
Wow.
And that's what it's involved. And I mean, now you can get a titanium face mask that weighs 3 ounces, instead of the old steel face mask or the Craylite.
You sell another. I would guess that you've done this. I don't know whether it's still. We used to joke about like the gear that the coaches used to wear, and maybe even what referees. I don't joke about that so much, but coaches used to have the coaches' shorts and stuff.
Sure.
I mean, do coaches still buy those kinds of things?
Oh, sure, but now they need the pockets because they've got keys to everything. Or one of the biggest things is these special lanyards that click off. You might have had those when you taught school. You had keys to all those things, and
No, I never had.
Yeah,
I mean, I know
polo
what you're talking
shirts
about,
with-
but yeah, those things. But it's not the what was it? The polyester. that
No,
used to
no,
be.
no,
I mean,
no,
the polyester is gone. But I mean,
Right.
that was. We went through that phase also. John Duncan, who produces this show, and before we started with our program, he said, "I just don't know how a store like Red Weir stays in business. You got Dick's Sporting Goods, and I guess other places, Gowan's. I'm not sure what other stores are." What's the secret of a store like Red Weir still succeeding?
first of all, we sell a little of the same merchandise, but most of all, we don't sell the same things and we don't have the same customers. We focus on schools and institutions and leagues and hard goods, and they're in the retail business. They're trying to sell shorts and running shoes and things like that, and kayaks. I mean, you mentioned Dick's. They've got golf clubs to guns and fishing gear and all that. And we don't do that. We're just focused on athletic supplies.
But still, people come in and say, I need a good softball, or I
Sure,
need this or that.
sure.
I mean, people can come in and still buy those kinds of things.
Sure.
But it seems to me like it's a throwback to one of those times where it's a specialist type store where you're going in and you're going to get people who know the goods, and they're going to have the select stuff that you would want to take out onto the playing field and to use that way.
Right. We've just got our little niche market, and we focus on that. And we try not to get outside what we're really good at.
Sales consistent? I mean, we don't get on this program a lot to overall numbers and things like that, but I'm just curious as to, is there always a market for this no matter what's happening economically in the country?
High schools are always going to play sports, regardless of what happens. It'll just depend on the budget. Times that are good, you're going to have more. Times that are tight, you're going to have less. It kind of went like the last 4 or 5 years in the economy. Things got pretty tough. Sales were pretty flat, but you just keep working at it.
Do you do a lot of trophy sales and things
We
like that?
do a lot of trophy sales. in your case, track meets, basketball tournaments, award plaques, banquets, things like that. And then we also do a lot on the commercial side for.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, when people are talking about, well, we need a trophy for this or we need some sort of special recognition, it seems like Red Weir has just been synonymous with that also for a long time.
We do lots of trophies.
When you see something that comes out of Nike for Oregon or even Missouri this year and Maryland a couple of years ago, when they were doing things with uniforms to make them more colorful, more attractive, more appealing to that college age, do you and your brother or others in the business sit around and talk about that or have a reaction to that?
Yeah, and the other thing is funny is when somebody comes out with something new, a lot of times we go, I remember when we had that in 1980. This is the second time around for that, or
really,
tried this
like
before.
for like an example.
I'll think of something
just
here
a
in a
style?
minute. Just a style or whatever. Well, take Chuck Taylor's. You know, they died. They died right there on the vine when Adidas came out with the Walt Frazier Clyde the Glide shoe, which was suede. Then Nike started, and they had a pretty decent basketball shoe, and then the Jordan models took off and all that. And, you know, Chuck Taylor died. Well, now it's back, and it's the hottest thing. You see it on MTV.
Oh, I mean, it's a cool thing now. It's a style
cool thing,
statement.
Yeah, well, we've had that before.
Air Jordans, when they came out, was that just like a huge thing?
Oh, yeah.
Now, did whole teams buy that for their players? Because I'm wondering, did they go that direction like our teams always use Chuck Taylor?
Yeah, a lot of them do. And some schools, each school predicated on their basketball coach. If he wanted everybody to have the same style, same team shoe, yes. And then other coaches decide, you know, it's your business. Buy whatever type shoe you want. Let's just try to get them all black or all blue or whatever. And so, yeah.
What's the longest? What's one of like a classic shoe companies? Would Adidas be the one that's been
Adidas
around about as long as
and Nike? Adidas would be along.
Puma still's out there.
Puma's still out there.
I mean, people don't realize that. I mean, that was one of the ones that was kind of big back in the day. I mean, prior to Nike, I think Puma and Adidas would have been some. I can't think of, but the new ones come along.
Spot Built was the premier football shoe for a long, long time, and they had the kangaroo leather shoe, which was lighter weight than the cowhide.
Did you do some of the, I'm thinking about downs markers and chains and stuff like that. Did that come from Red Weir also sometimes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do those, the pylons, the sideline markers.
Really?
Yeah. Goalpost padding.
You do goalpost?
Oh, yeah. High jump pits.
I got to tell you, I don't think Coach Dunn ever bought a goalpost from you. I think he always had his own welded.
He always had them welded. Yeah.
I mean, that's what they do. I was just reading a story now about goalpost installation and the ones that are really quick to respond to, like at the end of the game where you can take them
Drop
down
them
very quickly.
Right.
So I didn't realize you did goalpost also. Do you sell a lot of those?
Oh, you sell maybe one set a year. Goalpost.
I have no idea.
Glass backboards. We do lots of glass backboards.
Yeah.
It kind of goes in a cycle. You won't sell any for a year. And then like this year, I think we've already sold like 12 or 15. Just they're redoing their gyms or they break and whatever. So we stock a few glass backboards.
We're going to take our we'll take our final break, and we'll come back and finish our visit with Mike Weir. We're glad you're listening to us today. It's the Heritage Program, talking athletic supply. Red Weir, part of the community for now 50-plus years. This is News Talk 1400, KFRU.
More coming up on News Talk 1400, KFRU. This is the KFRU Heritage Series.
We're enjoying talking about athletic supplies with Mike Weir of Red Weir Athletic Supply, Inc., and still thinking about selling I guess I didn't ever realize who would be a dealer to go to for a goalpost, but it makes sense. And a backboard also. Now that one I could see. I'll ask you questions. I know there are certain things you can't answer about what else you do in addition to running with your brother Red Weir, and that is you are a referee on the NFL level. Forget that right now. When did you get into refereeing, and where did you start doing that?
Oh, in about 1974, I know this, is my dad was officiating, too, high school football and basketball, and I was going to school over at Missouri, and he goes, you know, you need a little part-time job besides what you're doing for me working down here. And he said, I think you ought to start officiating football. And so I did. And of course, you start at at that time, there was no youth football like there is today here in town. So you started out at the junior high, like West Jeff, ninth grade games, Macon, and Centralia, and all those places, and just started officiating those, and then eventually worked up to the varsity level. And then in 1984, I got hired in the Big Eight by Bruce Finlayson. And so I worked 12 years in the Big Eight Conference, and then when they moved into the Big 12, I worked 6 years in that, and then I was lucky enough to get in the National Football League, and I just finished my 11th year.
Wow. Did you ever referee with your father?
Yeah, at the junior high level a little bit, and
what was that fun, or was he?
It was fun because you'd say something happened, and you go, no, that isn't the way it is. And at that time, you didn't have videotape like everybody does, and all of this, and so you would use the veteran guys to tell you how to learn the rules, understand the rules, the philosophy of the rules, and that's the way it worked then. And when we first started using videotape,
and you're talking about videotape not as an instant replay to check whether you made the right call. You're saying to say, what can we learn from this by watching?
Yeah, the coaches taped the football games, and it was 16-millimeter film at that time, so you're familiar with that. Yeah. And then it went to video cameras, and it's progressed up to CDs and everything else.
So did you do basketball and football?
I did basketball, too, for about 25 years. And I started the same way. When I started in 1975, 76, they just started girls. And so we had 7th grade girls here in town, 8th grade girls, 9th grade girls. They played basketball every night someplace at the junior highs. And so I had a lot and so did Southern Boone and Hallsville and Centralia. And so at that time, I didn't have a lot going on at night. And so it was nothing to work 5-6 nights a week.
Well, if you started in 1974, I mean, you were still in college. It's right in college.
Right.
Then. That has to be kind of a neat job to be able to say you're doing. But how were
it kept me out of Harpo's at night and some of those other things that were.
People would think that as you got up to the college level, like Big 8 and then Big 12, that there would be less of that loudness that you would hear perhaps at a junior high or high school game when parents are yelling. Is that a true assumption?
Well, yeah, the volume's probably louder, but there's nothing better than an 8th grade girls game over Jeff Jr. on the stage.
Really? On the stage,
with
the stage also.
Moms and dads yelling, and they're right there. And then, West is a West Junior at that. There was no Oakland at that time when I was starting out. And West, with the tile floor, and it was slick, and so everybody traveled.
When was the last time? When was the last time that somebody who knows you and played ball and you reffed has come up to you and say, you know what, you still missed that call?
I can think of 3 or 4 guys right now that I'm good friends with that played, and that's one of the neat things because now they're coming back to the store, bringing their kids in, and whatever, and they always want to talk about some game that happened in 1986.
People have a lot better memory than most of us do, but I mean that's such an important thing, and I can know of friends of mine who also might get upset with certain calls and certain things that were done. I'm curious, when you do a Big 8 or a Big 12 game, when you were doing that, and it was football at that time, you weren't doing any basketball. Were you aware of the name players that are? I'm always wondering if referees are geared up for the fact that they know who it is. I mean, you're probably a sports fan, so you got to know some of this. Are you aware of that, or is it something that you blocked out and not paying much attention to?
Oh, you're aware of the players and all that, but you don't focus on that because you have to focus on your keys for the position you're officiating that day, and you have to pay attention to what you're doing out there.
I always treat referees. I mean, I understand that I've gone through phases in my life when I thought referees were like the horrible human beings, but I basically think of them as judges, people that you can respect, and they are the arbitrators of what is going on, and the insurers of fair play. And I think overall, I mean, I really think, and that's why there's a respect and trust of them so much that oftentimes people who are connected with maybe Columbia, Missouri, could still do a Missouri ball game. You did that a few times, didn't you?
Yeah, they used to have a rule in the Big 8 you couldn't do that, and then in the Big 12 when they had they signed off. The football coaches said that you could do it. I always put on my sheet that I didn't want to do it, but the supervisor didn't pay attention to that one year, and so I had 3 games over at Missouri one year, and that was enough.
I mean, you could do the job very well, but the unfairness to you would be that the appearance of them,
right.
And people always let their emotions work into what they think a referee is doing. I know there are certain questions I can't ask you about refereeing in the NFL. I just think that how soon ahead of time would you get your assignment in the NFL?
In about 4 weeks in advance.
4 weeks, and pretty steady. I mean, your years there are pretty steady. Every weekend during a regular season, you can be expected
when
to work.
you start with a clinic in mid-July, and then you have the next weekend off, and then you go to training camp for a week, and then preseason starts, and then you're to September, and then it's 23 weeks.
Does the organization of referees for the NFL suggest a workout that you would do to keep in shape, or is that pretty much up to you?
Yeah, we have to pass a physical.
Yeah.
And the local doctors here in town, when we go for the treadmill test, they go, this is more than what an airline pilot has to do. And one year, the league asked us to participate in a little test for a group, and so we all wore pedometers during the game, and some guys volunteered to heart monitors and things like that. But the interesting thing is we wore those pedometers. You don't really realize the field judge, which is what I am, averaged 6.2 miles per game.
That's
of
10
running.
kilometers. That's 10K.
Yeah.
You're doing a 10K.
And the referees and the umpires at that time ran more than like the back judge in the defensive backfield that you would think, because they run forward every play and all that, and they were over 7 miles per game. And so, yeah, we do work out.
And they don't platoon you.
No, you don't get rest, and and the next group is in. But we have to meet a certain weight goal, and you have to be in a certain amount of shape. You have to pass the physical, which is, it's not like lifting dumbbells over your head, but you have to pass the stress test, which... the funny thing, when I was taking it one time, they go, airline pilots only go up to 6 degrees. You guys have to go up to 9, and you have to maintain this for over 3 minutes. She goes, this is crazy.
Wow. We're out of time. I'd love to squeeze in. I'm going to squeeze in one more question, be very brief on this. I hear from